Racial discrimination in education and the economy. My name is Melina Castillo, and I'm a senior at Port of Los Angeles High School who's interested in empowering minorities. In the summer of my junior year, I studied racial inequities in education, cultural theory, feminist theory, and queer theory at Amherst College as part of SES Noonan Scholars. In my first semester of senior year, I also took a college-level intro to sociology class. I chose to research this topic because it directly affects my community. I started with what I learned in my class at Amherst College as a base off of which to ask questions. From there, I went to APGOV to find answers to those questions, as well as hear new perspectives. My greatest challenge was finding articles that included statistics directly related to my thesis, since my claim is very specific. Thesis. Racial discrimination in high schools are deterring students of color from seeking higher education, resulting in disproportionate socioeconomic statuses based primarily on race. Governments need to address these issues by implementing transformational changes to traditional school structures that include reflective pedagogy surrounding discrimination and a more in-depth analysis of social audits that track these developments. I developed my thesis as I found evidence that was particularly interesting to me. Part of my thesis was based on a solution that was suggested by a study. Racial and color discrimination in high school. African American and Latino youth are significantly more likely than others to be routed to prison directly from school. Hunter. This evidence is provided by sociology professor Margaret Hunter to support the claim that faculty-student interactions at schools are influenced by race. Lighter-skinned students are more often assumed to be intelligent and kind, while darker-skinned students are prejudged as aggressive, problematic, and less intelligent. Hunter's evidence is an example of how these biased interactions can affect students of color. Being unfairly routed to prison directly from school impacts the students' future career and educational opportunities, making them more likely to be caught in the cycle of poverty. Internalized racism and hate. Based on these false dichotomies, the students see the labels as mutually exclusive and take on the ones that allow them greater privilege and prestige. Klein. Tatiana Klein, the director of the bilingual education and TESOL programs, conducted a study where she interviewed teachers of unconventional classrooms that had majority immigrant and majority people of color. Even without the presence of a white majority, students learned racism and discrimination and partook in it to be socially accepted. Klein discusses the students' use of the labels as describes their identities as using it only when convenient. This means schools indirectly teach people of color to have internalized racism, which is damaging because it contributes to structural racism, where even if there are not directly racist policies in place, students will experience racism in institutions of education. Disproportionate college statistics. In a study by Patrick Lester in the Social Innovation Research Center, white and Asian students were found to graduate at higher rates than Hispanics, Native Americans, and African American students. The negative experience students of color go through are shown to correlate with graduation rates, as shown by CIRC. This gap represents an inequity in the education system that benefits white and Asian students over other demographics. It's important to note that while the number of Hispanics going to college is increasing, it is primarily because they're graduating from community colleges. This means that there's gatekeeping of four-year universities for minorities due to high school performance, as well as financial resources that are affected by race and ethnicity. Less economic opportunities cause an expansion of the lower class. We find no significant difference between black and white unsecured debt holdings, while both Asian and Latino families had significantly less unsecured debt than their white family counterparts. Hamilton. Here, Hamilton addresses the misleading assumption that people of color are on average poor because they are more likely to be financially irresponsible. This assumption is racist and similar to the effects seen in schools where assumptions on race affect the teacher's view of students. Hamilton suggested that resources that people of color grew up with, rather than financial responsibility, are responsible for the demographic of low-income families. Education is included in resources because education is used as a tool to earn degrees and skills certifications that give people more access to higher paying jobs. Poor quality education seen in low income neighborhoods leads to lower chances of pursuing higher education and skilled careers and thus less income. Solvency in high schools. Transformational change involves repositioning and reorienting action through the adoption of radically different means of doing the work it has traditionally done. Colgrane-Sappington. Transformational change is needed in schools to address problems of income inequalities influenced by race. Transformational change is defined by Sappington to mean changing the inherently biased structure of school culture rather than making general improvements within an existing system. Teachers need to play a role in this by favoring more inclusive and culturally responsive approaches to the pedagogy. This includes having uncomfortable conversations with students about social issues rather than suppressing existing problems only during class time. Part of changing school culture is conducting social audits that track progress. Conducting social audits means making physical and detailed reports on how implemented programs and approaches are working to achieve transformational change. This can include anything ranging from graduation rates to surveys to test score reports. Ideally, these audits would be overseen by the government to ensure results are not tampered with and are available to the public. My call to action. Schools should look to change their culture through transformational change. Transformational change should be regulated by the government to see which programs and policies are and are not working, and teachers should encourage reflective conversations about these issues within their classrooms. Thank you.